Is it a bad thing if my pastor goes through trials in his faith? Hi, my name is Ted Rosenblatt, and I'm here with my father, Dr. Rod Rosenblatt, and this is Talks with Dad Rod. We don't often think this way, but pastors go through the same. They're sinners like the rest of us, and they can have these moments that can be fearful, frightening, full of doubt. And and on kind of tangentially, I feel particularly, and I try to remember to pray for our pastors, because it's got to be a lonely position. It's not like you can go to your parishioners and talk about this.
No.
But is that a good thing if they struggle with that sort of thing?
It actually is for us sheep. The thing that would frighten me is a pastor who is always winning, constantly winning. No anxiety, no doubt, no losses, no sin, no
confession, no repentance, no failures.
The pastor who himself is assaulted is in a very good place to help me as a sheep being assaulted.
And we're talking about the world and our flesh and the devil.
Yep.
The unholy triad that's always hammering on us.
Yep. And if he actually experiences those, a certain amount of ability to speak to the sheep comes that wouldn't in any other way. If he knows what those assaults are autobiographically, it's very much easier for him to help the sheep who are wrestling with it every day of every week.
And this has been on our minds to be more explicit recently, because we lost one of our good friends and
colleagues,
faithful colleagues it's crushed us all that our friend Jim Nestingen died within the last few weeks. And there are a few men who have this sort of naturally jovial, healing spirit that you just want to sit with. There are more men than most, and hopefully we're able to do that. This is the sort of thing Dad does here. He doesn't speak about it of himself. He will speak of Dad. Dad will speak of it about his dad, and then others get to speak about it of him. That this spirit is very healing, and to lose someone like that you've been able to go to and laugh and cry with and talk and sort of confess with, not official confessions, but you just everything, and there are people like that once in a while that come along. It's a spirit that's so polarly different than the other stuff you get on the earth. It is so different.
Yep.
And so some losses are greater than others. And that somebody who has been gone through their own trials and is generally happy.
Yep.
But he doesn't shy away from any of the realities of any of that stuff. His perspective is just very different.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great loss.
And I don't even know the differences in your ages, but everybody, regardless of age, would just want to be with him. You don't notice the difference. Even those who are his peers, you just want to be with him because he just removes. That spirit is one that removes the fear and the guilt and the pain and the struggle, and everything's okay again.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very little focused on displaying righteousness. Very little. And instead, in its place, you found humor, lightness, joviality, laughter. Unusual.
For you too. He was defensive of you as he did it.
Yeah. Yeah. We have some videos out where Jim is the major speaker and character in it. And take a look. See what you think.
It's in a certain sense, I think of him. I always do present tense. I'm funny that way. I always mix my present and past tense on this one because I know he's, I'm going to see him again.
Yep.
So I am always like, well, he's just in a different place and I can't talk to him now, which is where my frustration comes from because I can't talk to him and see him anymore, at least not for a while. But he comes across sort of as the pastor's pastor. He's the guy that a pastor could come and sit with,
Yes.
regardless of denomination, and get counsel that would just, you end up in tears because it's so relieving.
Yeah.
It's so happy and so
And
relieving.
he did it as easily as we breathe.
He just sort of talks as though you aren't the problem. You know, you're just not the problem. So you're struggling with this, the Germans call it Anfechtungen, right? So you've got this sort of thing that's on you. You know, you're doubting and you're fearful of something and you're struggling and you're not, and you don't, as a pastor, you don't even talk to your wife about it. You're trying to think of the right colleague to talk about it. And you end up seeing Jim. And Jim just sort of sits there and just kind of chuckles in his big belly. And he's just it's just all of a sudden, it feels like, you know, this reminds me of Paul Fairweather too, our old counselor. You know, this guy that's our old fighter pilot friend of ours, and he was the same kind of way. He'd bring stuff and he'd just kind of chuckle at you, and I'm like, "This is huge stuff. How can you chuckle?"
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
But it's in a way that it's just all the worry and all the intensity and all the weight is just gone. It's just not a thing anymore. And you're okay with me. And he just does it in a way that makes it sound, he tells then the stories that are relevant, that talk about this in a way like God is for you.
Yeah.
And it's not as big a deal to him.
Yep.
You're struggling, but he's taking that from you. He just wants to sit with you and eat and drink. And
if you know anybody like this, value them, say so.
if we're doing anything here, we're kind of putting you in the room. That's kind of the goal. And one of the things we're doing is trying to continue forward the same sort of thing that Dad was able to do on White Horse Inn, where people just are like, I don't know what it is, right? And I'm telling you, and we talked about this in pre-production, the spirit of the good father bridges the anxiety over to the salvation. Because there's something about the good father, the earthly good father, that sort of in that modeling of it, even an adopted good father, even just a friend, even somebody you know that's just a friend of a friend that you just ran into or something, who's kind of who Dad is, right? You get to be in the room and you get to just hear his voice, and there's something that implicitly happens where you feel like somehow, I've never met Rod Rosenblatt, but I feel like he'd be okay with me and he would understand my struggles, right? I have struggled this way and that way. I don't believe. I haven't believed. I've never gone to church. We did go to church. My horrific experience in the church, all of that. And you sit there at Dad's kitchen table and he's just kind of chuckles and goes, well, here's, why you were struggling with that. And everything is happy. It's never you're the problem, ever. So I guess because you won't talk about that, I can't really ask that question. How was that? How did your dad do that with you?
Well, you got a couple hours?
No. So we can do more of that later. I would like to do, what do you think? Put in the comments. Should we do an episode about that kind of does that more? Dad's told his stories over and over again. I'd like to weave more into daily life type of stuff. Like, why did his dad buy his kids a farm? That's not something you hear about very often, but how just quick, I know, but how that's the model you've had and you've sought in other men as we've moved forward.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rare, but it's redeeming. I mean, to not be treated as a problem is unusual.
As it
just
sort of as the pseudo child.
Yep.
Even if it's not actual, you feel like the child in the room under the senior and you're just safe. It feels like you're protected. There's like this magical shield that's sort of in there, but not there. But you feel like it's there, and nothing can harm you at that point.
Yeah.
You're utterly okay. Anything can leave your mouth, and it's not a problem for the good father. The good father cherishes you and treasures you and all your experiences, and even cherishes you as you struggle. There's something magical about that. And you're like, the not being a problem with your earthly father is the representation of the great I'm okay with you that we've been given.
Yep.
As I said recently, in I am for you, the great I am is for you as we get in scripture. And it's this way. Dad in front of the giant fireplace, and you just get to sit there with him and be like, nothing that was bothering me is bothering me anymore, at least not for these minutes.
Yeah. Good picture.
And is that not your dad?
Yep.
That's what I've gotten from you.
Yep.
His pool and your friends, and I've put a limit on the time. That's why he's not talking.
Well, we can devote some episode to telling a few of those.
So when your pastor is struggling with these moments, it kind of puts their feet in the mud of the real.
Mm-hmm.
And when their feet are dirty, when they've gone through the emotional hell of that in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And then the parishioners come to them and they're struggling with that hell.
Yep.
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
We can identify with each other. What is it? Where's that line? We meet in our pain. What was that? There was an old line about how I'll have to go look this up. It's just right off the top of my head. I was remembering this, where you would talk about this, about how we connect in our pain. We connect in our suffering. Mm-hmm. This is where we connect. And Dad would usually mention us men as our group. And he would talk about, from our experience as men, that we connect in our suffering, but I know it's we as human beings. And when we identify with one another in our suffering, it relieves us of our suffering. When someone next to us can understand where we're coming from, I think it's the basis of AA.
Yeah. Yeah, in the beginning it had Christian roots. It's no longer that, but in the beginning, Sam Shoemaker, it did have Christian roots.
So before I go way off into the weeds, hope this is helpful for you and encouraging to you and brings you light as we go through this winter, because it's so cold, and here in 2023 as we get going into January, and that this feeds your faith. You can find more over on 1517.org, and we hope you find us on social media, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us on Talks with Dad Rod, part of the 1517 Podcast Network. This podcast and all 1517's content is made possible through financial support by listeners just like you. Please visit 1517.org for more, and please consider clicking on the donate button and making a recurring or one-time contribution to help us share this good news in a world which so desperately needs it.